He tried locking his mother up in her room to prevent her from visiting the Juju man, but before he knew what was happening, Norma had jumped out through the window to go see the love of her life. Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Ubochi, lived a beautiful woman named Norma. Norma was a single mother who lived with her son Chiejina, who she gave birth to when she was young. She was only 14 years of age when she gave birth to Chiejina, who grew up to be a very handsome and hardworking boy. They lived alone in the village, and people often mistook them for siblings because of how young and beautiful Norma looked. She was still single and yet to find a man willing to marry her. One day, she met a very handsome man named Unduka who piqued an interest in her and wanted to marry her. They had so many things in common, and Norma was already falling deeply in love with him. She decided that it was high time for her to introduce him to her son. She invited him over to her house and prepared a very delicious meal for him. Before Unduka arrived, Norma notified her son Chiejina of his visit. She urged Chiejina to be of his best behavior as she could not risk anything going wrong. A few hours later, Unduka arrived at home and was shocked to realize that Norma had a grown-up son. They got talking, and after a few hours, Unduka left Norma's home in smiles. Norma was so excited. She believed that she had finally found a man who accepted her for who she was. Little did she know that this was not the case. As the days went by, Norma noticed that Unduka's attitude towards her had begun to change. He was so distant, and all efforts by her to communicate with him failed. So Norma grew worried and decided to confront him about his strange behavior. She strolled down to his house one evening to ask what the problem was, and Norma was so shocked to see another woman in Unduka's home. She asked him why he had to treat her in such a way, and Unduka, without mincing any words, told her to her face that he can never marry a loose woman, a woman who could not keep herself till marriage but decided to sleep around with different men and got pregnant in the process. Unduka called Norma so many unprintable names, warning her to stay away from him, and Norma, listening to the hurtful words that he said, burst out in tears as she ran back home sad. She could not believe that Unduka was such a vile man who had no regard for others. However, she was comforted by the fact that she had a son who loved her even when the whole world was against her. She returned home looking extremely sad, and her son Chiejina could not help but notice that something was amiss with his mother. This was the sixth man who was breaking his mother's heart in a short time, and Chiejina could not help but see the pain in her eyes. He approached his mother and hugged her tightly, reminding her of how much he loved her, and Norma let out a very loud cry as Chiejina did all he could to comfort her. For days, Norma kept to herself and never left her room. She was so heartbroken and wondered if she would ever find love in her life. Her friend Chikodi, on hearing all that had happened, decided to pay Norma a visit. She arrived at home and met Norma in a very sad state. Chikodi told Norma that she had a solution to her problem and that Norma had to follow her to go meet a very powerful man who had the power to end her suffering. Desperate to find love, Norma agreed to follow her friend Chikodi to go meet the powerful man. They arrived his hut and Norma narrated her plight to him. The Juju man handed her a liquid to drink, and Norma, without thinking twice, gulped down the liquid as the powerful man informed her that her love was near. Norma was so excited to hear this as she returned home laughing and smiling. Her son Chiejina could not help but notice how happy his mother was. He inquired to know why, but Norma could not bring herself to tell him that she paid a visit to a Juju man. She kept it a secret, but as the days went by, Norma noticed that she was now falling in love with the Juju man. All she could ever think of was him, and Norma felt an uncontrollable urge to go visit his shrine. She arrived at his shrine that evening and began to sing, professing her love for the Juju man who sat inside his shrine, smiling as he enjoyed her sweet melodies. Norma became so restless as all she could ever think of was him. The love she had so yearned for was finally a reality, but who could have ever thought that it was going to be a Juju man? Her son Chiejina, noticing his mother's strange behavior, became so worried. He watched as his mother Norma snuck out of their house suspiciously, only to return hours later with a mysterious smile on her face. Chiejina knew that something was wrong, especially as his mother began to act strangely around him, as if she was hiding something. So, he followed her one day to fully understand what was going on with her. To his greatest surprise, he saw his mother walking into the shrine. Chiejina in that moment knew that something terrible had happened. He returned home and confronted his mother later that evening when she returned, requesting to know what she was doing at the shrine, and Norma replied him saying that she was deeply in love with the Juju man. She told Chiejina that the Juju man was her soulmate and that nothing would ever break them apart. Chiejina could not believe his ears as he pondered on what to do. He tried locking his mother up in her room to prevent her from visiting the Juju man, but before he knew what was happening, Norma had jumped out through the window to go see the love of her life. Her obsession with the Juju man terrified Chiejina, who wondered how his mother got herself into such a mess. He approached her friend Chikodi to complain about his mother's strange fondness for the Juju man, and Chikodi pretended not to know what he was talking about. She advised him to find help for his mother as she was too busy to help at the moment. Her nonchalant attitude towards the news got Chiejina worried as he wondered what exactly was going on. Few days later, Chiejina realized that Chikodi was getting married to Unduka, the man who rejected his mother a few weeks ago. He alerted his mother of the news, but his mother seemed not to care that her best friend was getting married to the man that broke her heart. Chiejina was deeply troubled by his mother's indifference as well as Chikodi's sudden engagement to Unduka. He could not shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Little did he know that it was Chikodi who took his mother to go see the Juju man that she was now deeply in love with. As the days went by, Norma's behavior became so erratic as she snuck out of the house even in the middle of the night to go visit the Juju man. She started doing bizarre things like drawing strange markings on her body, which she believed signified her love for him. She even went as far as sacrificing their only goat to cook a special meal for the Juju man, who she called the love of her life. Norma believed that the Juju man's every word was divine truth. She neglected her son at home and became so isolated from him. She even started wearing charms and amulets, convinced that they were symbols of her undying love for the Juju man. Chiejina, on seeing all this, became increasingly desperate to save his mother. In a bid to achieve this, he decided to confront the Juju man directly in his shrine. He marched to the shrine, filled with so much courage and a determination to set his mother free from his hold. When he arrived at the shrine, he found his mother sitting in a corner, staring at the Juju man in admiration. The Juju man, on sighting him, was filled with rage as he asked Chiejina what he was doing in his shrine, and Chiejina, looking him directly in his eyes, demanded that his mother be released from his evil spell. The Juju man laughed and asked Chiejina who he was to challenge his power. Before Chiejina knew what was happening, he struck him with his evil staff, rendering him unconscious. Norma watched in horror as her son Chiejina fell to the ground with a thud. The Juju man let out a very terrifying laughter as he boasted of the extent of his powers. "Your son is no match for my power," he said, as he looked at Norma, who stood in a corner confused. Chiejina, now unconscious, found his spirit in a strange hut. He met a very old woman who told him that she had been waiting for him for a very long time. She revealed to him that there was something that he needed to know to enable him break the spell that had kept his mother bound to the evil man. Chiejina listened attentively as the old woman revealed the truth about his origin. She told him that so many years ago, when his mother was only 14, she went to the farm alone to cultivate some crops for her father. It was already getting dark, so she decided to pack up the crops and head home. On her way, an evil man caught sight of her and did some incantations that made her fall into a very deep sleep. In her unconscious state, he made his way with her, and after a few hours, she woke up and found herself sleeping by the side of the bush. Unsure of what had happened, she picked up her basket and rushed home. A few weeks later, she realized that she was pregnant and wondered how this was possible. Her family disowned her for bringing shame to them. Little did they know that she was a victim herself. Chiejina's heart broke into a million pieces to hear this. He asked the old woman who the man was, and the old woman revealed to him that the Juju man was his father. She revealed that Chikodi, his mother's friend, initially paid a visit to the Juju man to help her put a love charm on Norma, which would take Norma's mind away from Unduka. She did this so as to ensure that nothing stopped her from getting married to Unduka. Little did she know that the Juju man had waited for this opportunity for a very long time. He gave Norma the charm, which made her fall deeply in love with him, hoping that this would eventually bring him closer to his son Chiejina. The old woman told Chiejina that he had the power to break the spell because he was the son of the Juju man. She told him that all it took was for the truth to set them free, and immediately Chiejina woke up from the trance, filled with so much anger. He confronted the Juju man once again, his voice steady and strong. "I know the truth now," he said. "You are my father, and you have used your dark powers to bring suffering to my mother and I. But today, I stand and say no more. The love I have for my mother is stronger than any spell you can cast." The Juju man, now filled with rage, tried to strike Chiejina, but realized that his Juju was no longer working. Chiejina stepped closer to his mother, taking her hand in his. "Mother, remember who you are. Remember the love we share. This man is not your soulmate. He is the one who has caused all your pain." Norma, still under the spell, began to feel a sensation in her heart. Memories of all her life with Chiejina, the love and bond they shared, started to flood through her mind. She looked at her son as her eyes began to clear. "Chiejina, my son, what have I done?" she whispered as tears streamed down her face. The Juju man, seeing the spell weaken, desperately tried to reinforce it, but Chiejina's love for his mother was too strong. "You cannot break the bond of true love," Chiejina said as his mother finally broke free from the spell completely. The Juju man could not believe his eyes as he realized that his power had begun to crumble. The truth of the past and the love Chiejina had for his mother shattered the Juju man's evil powers, rendering him completely powerless. Defeated, the Juju man fled the shrine as he disappeared into the depths of the forest. Norma hugged her son tightly as she apologized for all that she put him through. She could not believe that the Juju man was the one who got her pregnant so many years ago. She was grateful that he was now powerless, as this would put an end to his reign of terror, both in their lives and in the lives of those that he had tormented in the past. As the days went by, Norma found out about her friend's betrayal and couldn't believe that Chikodi was now married to Unduka. Not long afterwards, Norma met a man who loved and cherished her with all of his heart. He loved her son Chiejina and took him as his own. They got married and Norma lived a very happy life with her husband. Her friend Chikodi, however, lived a life of misery with Nduka, who turned her into a punching bag. Nduka was a very heartless man who had no self-control and cheated on her with several women in the village. Chikodi, who had schemed so desperately to marry Nduka, found herself trapped in a life of unhappiness and regret. The very man she had betrayed her friend for turned out to be her worst nightmare. Her days were filled with sorrow, and she often reflected on the choices she had made that led her to such a miserable fate. Meanwhile, Norma's life took a turn for the better. The man she married treated her with respect and love, and he embraced changing her as his own son. They built a peaceful and loving home together, and the shadows of the past slowly faded away. The lesson to be learned from this story is that nothing remains hidden under the sun. It might take a while, but the truth will always come to light. Be careful of those that you call friends, as not everyone who appears to be a friend truly has your best interest at heart, so be cautious of whom you trust. Disappointment can often come as a blessing in disguise, so learn to always remain positive in whatever situation you find yourself. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.